The true heiress, falsely accused of habitual bullying. In my previous life, I died from anaphylactic shock, a pain that felt like it was tearing me apart. I was tied up, my body covered in bruises, lying on the ground with a sharp pain in my stomach. My younger brother, Lucas Lin, stood over me, looking down from above. As he watched my twisted body on the ground, a pleased smile spread across his face. "Sophie, sure, when you forced Yaya to eat mangoes back then, did you ever think this day would come? She was such a kind girl. You had already taken everything from her, why couldn't you just let her be?" He squatted down, staring at my face, which was covered in red welts from the allergy, and kicked me in disgust. As the pain intensified, my consciousness slowly faded away, eventually transforming into a floating spirit. I thought that with my death, they would be overjoyed and triumphant. But I never imagined that after my death, my once loathing fiancé would turn white-haired overnight and go mad on the spot. After my death, he frantically exposed the true nature of the fake heiress. Upon learning the truth, my brother, who caused my death, spat blood in public and was consumed with regret. In the end, the two of them joined forces to send the slanderous fake heiress to prison while Lucas Lin turned himself into the police. It was then that I realized I was the heroine of a tragic romance novel, where all my suffering was merely a tool to highlight the male lead's deep affection after my death. But what good is repentance when the person is already dead? I watched as my friends wept uncontrollably over my death, and the male lead, filled with deep feelings for me, sat alone in his vast domain, consumed by loneliness. In my rage, my spirit gradually became transparent. In the final moments of my dissipating consciousness, I thought, if there is a next life, I will make sure every single one of them dies a miserable death. When I woke up again, my mind was in a daze for a moment. In front of me was a luxurious living room, and Chloe Lin was tightly protected behind Lucas Lin. Through the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the hallway, I saw a dark-skinned face and a body so thin that it was almost just skin and bones. Almost instantly, I realized that I had been reborn, back to the first day I was taken home. Before I could organize my thoughts, Chloe Lin, who was leaning against Lucas Lin, started to sob. "Sister, I know you have issues with me, but you can't bully me like this. I clearly told you I was allergic to mangoes, why did you still force me to eat them?" She hid behind Lucas Lin, crying uncontrollably. I silently watched Lucas Lin's increasingly unfriendly gaze towards me, but deep down, I felt a bit amused. It was the same old trick. In my previous life, I was a wild child brought back from the countryside, and I was extremely nervous on my first day here. Chloe Lin took the initiative to talk to me and even asked for the mangoes I had picked by hand from the countryside. To show goodwill, I picked the biggest, ripest one for her and even peeled it myself. As soon as she got the mango, she took a bite and started screaming like she had gone mad. She said I gave her the mango out of spite, trying to ruin her looks with such a method. It was ridiculous. I didn't even scold her for wasting food and taking over my place. Yet, she had the nerve to play the victim. While I didn't fall for her delicate act, many others did. After her speech, Lucas Lin immediately felt sorry for her. "How can a wild girl with no manners be as understanding as you, Yaya?" He bent down, gently applying ointment to her slightly swollen lips, and then turned to glare at me. "Sophie Lin, apologized to Yaya." I coldly watched the two of them act lovey-dovey, and the memory of being choked to death by Lucas Lin in my previous life flared up like a fire. I suddenly stepped forward and picked up the mango that had fallen on the ground. Before anyone could react, I jumped over the dining table, grabbed Chloe Lin's hair, and pressed the dusty mango hard against her face. What's a bite compared to bullying? If you have the guts, go ahead and have a shock for me to see. After a flurry of commotion, Chloe Lin was rushed to the hospital. However, the diagnosis was unexpected for everyone. Chloe Lin, who always avoided mangoes, had only a mild allergy, while the scratches she left on my arm were still visible. Seeing Lucas Lynn stiffen up after hearing the doctor's diagnosis, I almost burst out laughing. I had known in my previous life that Chloe Lynn was not actually allergic to mangoes. People with real allergies would break out in hives upon contact with the allergen. But when exposed to the splattered mango juice, Chloe Lynn only had a slight redness around her mouth. This is a common reaction to tropical fruits, yet she exaggerated it, causing my reputation to suffer. The pain of being slandered was still fresh in my mind. Not wanting to deal with the awkward situation, I decided to leave. I had far more important things to focus on in this life. Taking advantage of the distraction, I quickly exited through the side door and went downstairs to register for an appointment. As the saying goes, the three elements of a melodrama are a despicable supporting actress, a scumbag male lead, and a frail female lead. In my previous life, I knew I wouldn't live long even before Lucas Lynn force-fed me allergens. I had been diagnosed with stomach cancer, which disrupted many of my plans. Ultimately, when I returned home to settle my affairs, Lucas Lynn poisoned me to death. I didn't want to live so miserably this time. I wanted to climb higher and further, to tear off the hypocritical masks of these people. And to do all that, I needed a healthy body. So I consulted the best doctor, and the result was the same as in my previous life. But this time, it was discovered early, and it could be cured with timely surgery. After confirming the surgery schedule and details with the doctor, I went downstairs to sign the papers, only to be abruptly grabbed by the wrist from behind. "Sophie Lynn, how can you be so vicious?" A cold, angry male voice echoed. My fiancé, Henry Hua, with his striking features, appeared before me, his expression full of disdain. "Do you think you can attract me with such tactics? I find you repulsive, you cowardly woman." Silently, I slipped the diagnosis report into my backpack and looked at the enraged man before me, suddenly curious. "Henry Hua, do you truly think that compared to Chloe Lynn, I am the stronger one?" He responded without hesitation, "Of course. Yaya is a delicate little princess. How could she compete with a crude wild girl like you?" As he uttered the last word, I swiftly raised my right hand and slapped him hard across the face. In his stunned gaze, I casually dusted off my hand and smiled at him. "You're right, I am quite strong." Long before the Lin family found me, I had already met Henry Hua. My adoptive parents passed away early, leaving me a wild girl roaming freely in the countryside, while Henry Hua was a young man who had lost his memory after accidentally falling off a cliff. I went up the mountain to gather vegetables and saw him lying half dead by the roadside. Out of pity, I dragged him home. As in all cliched romance novels, our feelings for each other grew day by day as we spent time together. He once confessed to me deeply in a courtyard bathed in moonlight, pointing at the stars in the sky. He swore, "Sophie, sure, as long as you want, I can even pluck the stars for you." Annoyed by his persistence, I pointed to a star in the sky and asked him to pluck it for me. Unexpectedly, he took it seriously and followed the old man herding cattle next door to town the next day to buy a star. However, he didn't manage to bring back a star. As soon as he, a wealthy young master, appeared at a relevant institution, he was recognized and taken back to the Hua family. When we met again, he had already become the famous young master of the Hua family. At the same time, he viewed our past as a stain and insisted that he had mistaken me for Chloe Lynn when he confessed. In my previous life, I was naive and thought that treating him well would win back his heart. But in this life, I see things clearly. Isn't it just a stand-in trope? Who knows who will be whose stand-in this time around? I returned to the familiar campus. Having experienced the failure of being slandered, this time around, the bullying from Lucas Lynn was much less severe than in my previous life. There was no sticky glue on my chair, nor were there any pitch black bugs in my desk. However, Chloe Lynn still used her big, watery eyes to ask the boys in class to look after me. She said, "My sister came from the countryside. She doesn't like to bathe at home and often throws dirty things around. She doesn't understand the rules here, so please don't make things difficult for her." With these words, she seemed to be excusing me. But in reality, although I came from a rural area, the countryside had long since changed. Apart from my slightly darker skin, which I couldn't alter, I was just as hygienic as she was. Chloe's insinuations were merely to make the boys in class keep their distance from me. The school that the Lynn family had managed to place me in was filled with wealthy and prestigious students. Despite Chloe Lynn having quality catches like Henry Hua and Lucas Lynn, she still worried that I might find a good match here and turn my life around. Yet she seemed to forget one thing: wealthy families don't only have sons. After being ostracized by the boys, I was moved to the farthest corner of the classroom. My new desk mate was named Serena Jiang. Her father was a Forbes-listed tycoon who had appeared on magazine covers several times. In terms of family background, Ten Lin and Hua families combined wouldn't compare to hers. Having been pampered since childhood, she had developed a straightforward, arrogant personality. The whole class was waiting to see me make a fool of myself. But at this moment, the second-generation heiress sitting next to me, who was in the spotlight, was only troubled by a small physics problem. She was scratching her head in frustration over a test paper filled with red crosses, completely ignoring the country bumpkin sitting next to her. Until your approach to this problem is wrong. For the friction coefficient of object A on the inclined plane that this question is asking for, you just need to calculate when the object reaches the highest point for the same time as the first. Her hand, which was scratching her head, paused. I casually tore a page from my scratch paper and swiftly wrote down the correct formula. Serena Jiang's silent gaze followed my fingers as they moved quickly. When I finished explaining the problem, I reached for my water cup, my mouth parched. Suddenly, I felt a warm bear hug from behind, and Serena Jiang's excited voice rang in my ear. "Master, I bow to you." Few people know that Serena Jiang, the daughter of the richest man, dreams of becoming an astrophysicist who doesn't rely on her parents. Science subjects, unlike languages, do not heavily depend on external resources. As long as you are willing to learn and research, you can achieve good results even in towns with poor educational resources. I patiently and gently taught her how to solve problems, brought her meals, and comforted her when she was disappointed with her grades, just as I had done with Henry Hua in the past. Serena Jiang is not an ungrateful protagonist from a script. My presence made up for the lack of parental care due to her parents' busy schedules, and she reciprocated by giving me various precious gifts. While Chloe Lynn was still immersed in her dramatic love triangle, my grades and physical condition were secretly improving rapidly. With a foundation of daily hard work and the accumulation of excellent educational resources, I successfully secured a recommendation for admission to Peking University through a competition. At the same time, I maintained my exercise routine and changed my diet. In just half a year after enrolling, I transformed from a pale and thin ugly duckling into a well-proportioned and graceful black swan. This time, I didn't deliberately try to lighten my skin to please Henry Hua as I did in my previous life. In this life, I deeply understand that beauty standards are diverse. My prominent bone structure naturally gives me a mature and commanding presence. Trying to mimic Chloe Lynn's innocent and seductive style only makes me look awkward. Instead, my current casual and natural look makes me the dream girl in the eyes of my junior schoolmates. With these combined efforts, even the teachers responsible for the prestigious year-end performance reached out to me. If you don't have any special talents, Lynn, as an outstanding student representative, you can just say a few words, the admissions officer said to me. I knew they valued my story of rising from a humble background and securing a spot at Peking University. But I didn't care about that, because the year-end performance at Yilin High School always invited many influential figures from society. I had no reason to refuse such a great opportunity. Somehow, the news reached Chloe Lin and she was furious. As the pampered daughter of the Lin family, she had long prepared a violin solo for the performance, hoping to make a stunning impression. However, she knew well that at Yilin High School, which was full of talented individuals, even if she performed exceptionally, she would only receive a few minutes of applause. But being the top student recommended to Peking University was different. The dramatic reversal of my family background, my outstanding achievements, and the school's deliberate promotion all ensured that I would be the ultimate winner of the year-end performance. How could Chloe Lin accept this? So, she pretended to be a pitiful weakling in front of my brother and cried bitterly. She said, "If I can't make a stunning impression at the performance, Mom and Dad will definitely abandon me. Yunzhou, I don't want to be separated from you." With just one sentence, Lucas Lin's heart softened. "Don't worry, Yaya, I won't let you suffer any grievances," he promised Chloe Lin, and despite knowing that I hadn't bullied her, he complained to our parents. That afternoon, I was called back to the Lin family mansion by a phone call. Waiting for me were my father, with a dark expression, and Chloe Lin, looking pitiful beside him. "Kneel down." Before I could react, the sound of the paddle slicing through the air landed harshly on my back. In an instant, the excruciating pain of torn flesh spread from my spine downwards, and I couldn't help but drop to one knee. "Dad, why are you wasting words on her?" Lucas Lin stepped out from behind me, holding the paddle with a sneer on his face. "If you ask me, a wild girl like her who repeatedly refuses to change her ways doesn't deserve to stay in the Lin family." I curled up on the ground, writhing in pain, the taste of blood from my bitten lip filling my mouth. Lin's mother, who had been watching for a long time, walked over but only looked down at me with disdain, showing no trace of pity for her biological daughter. "Sophie Lin, we brought you back to the Lin family to make up for the past wrongs. But your wild nature remains unchanged, and you even dare to bring those despicable tactics into our home, targeting your sister at every turn. I think you should give the spot in the annual performance to your sister. First, as an apology, and second, to save yourself from embarrassing us outside." I almost laughed out of anger at the shamelessness of this family. On the way home, I had guessed that my parents would favor Chloe Lin. Because in their eyes, even though I am the true heiress they just retrieved, the blood ties between us still can't compare to the bond they have with the fake heiress they raised from childhood. Besides, the accolades I have achieved are solely through my own efforts. No matter how far I go in the future, others will only praise my perseverance and resilience. However, if these accolades were to fall on Chloe Lin, it would be different. Chloe Lin is notoriously mediocre in our circle. Since childhood, she has clung to the Lin family like a parasitic vine to grow. A child like her is easier to manipulate and more likely to earn them a reputation for good parenting and benevolence. I understood all this, but I never expected them to be this biased in the face of such absurd and baseless accusations. Dad, Mom. There is a saying in law, based on facts and guided by law. Even in court, without evidence, mere testimony cannot convict someone. Our family seems to be more advanced than the law, able to determine my bullying based solely on Lucas Lin's words and Chloe Lin's tears. Enduring the pain in my back, I forced a smile. Lucas Lin's eyes flickered with panic for a moment, but it was only for a moment. Soon, a cold smile spread across his face. "Sophie Lin, stop struggling. So what if there's no evidence? In the Lin family, you follow Lin family rules. Is that so?" I let out a mocking laugh and, under Chloe Lin's triumphant gaze, pulled out a tiny micro camera from the frame of my glasses. No one in this family cared whether I needed glasses, so no one noticed the ordinary black-framed glasses on my nose that I never wore before. I had already transmitted everything that had just happened via satellite. At this moment, even though Lynn's father and mother frantically reached out to snatch the glasses frame from my hand, it was too late. Looking at the four of them, each with a different expression, I smiled and forcefully pulled open the heavy door. Outside, the courtyard was already crowded with flashing cameras and a cacophony of voices that reached a crescendo as soon as the door opened. Lucas Lynn, this time, it's my turn to act. The baseless accusations from the Lynn family and the bullying by Lucas Lynn against me quickly spread across the internet. The incident happened suddenly, and the Lynn family could not bear to see their highly regarded son labeled as a bully by the public. They used all their connections to try and suppress the scandal. However, with subtle assistance from Serena Jiang, the scandal of the fake heiress bullying within the wealthy Lynn family was blown out of proportion by the media. By the time Henry Hua came to me to discuss a settlement, Lucas Lynn had already been forcibly detained under public pressure, awaiting further action. Sophie, sure, Yun Zhou did make a mistake in this matter, but after all, he is your biological brother. Taking this to court over such a matter seems a bit excessive. Backstage during rehearsal, Henry Hua stood behind the makeup mirror, looking at me with his familiar cold and arrogant gaze. Sometimes, I wondered if Henry Hua had damaged his brain when he was brought back home. Last time, when Chloe Lynn spread rumors about me bullying others, I merely gave her a minor punishment and he berated me as vicious. Yet, this time, it was clearly the Lynn family who unjustly bullied me, and he came to persuade me to be magnanimous and let them off. The sincere and passionate boy from Taoyuan town seemed like a dream now. Seeing him like this only filled me with disgust. I put down my eyebrow pencil with a cold smile and stood up, ready to go directly on stage. But my wrist was grabbed again. I turned around, and a complex emotion flashed in Henry Hua's eyes. It seemed like he had made some kind of decision. He pursed his lips, and his tone carried a hint of sadness. Sophie, sure, drink this bubble tea before you go on stage. Only then did I notice that inside his expensive black coat, he was holding a cup of my favorite taro bubble tea. Back in Taoyuan town, Henry Hua and I were both very poor. Once, when I was sick with a high fever, I kept mumbling in a daze that I wanted something sweet to drink. So, despite his usual cleanliness obsession, Henry Hua, who had lost his memory, spent a whole day picking up trash to buy me a cup of plain milk tea. At the time, he knelt by my bedside, feeding me while crying, and said, "Sophie, sure, I will make sure you have endless bubble tea in the future." But I never thought his promise would come so late. Staring at the still warm bubble tea in front of me, I hesitated for a moment but finally took a small sip. However, just before going on stage, I felt something was wrong. My throat felt like it was on fire, and waves of burning pain spread from my throat to my stomach. The script in front of me began to blur, and my voice noticeably turned hoarse. With a thud, I fainted on stage. "Henry Hua! How dare you show your face here? For that fake heiress, you and Lucas Lynn are eager to go to jail, right?" The first thing I saw when I woke up was the blue and white walls and the disinfectant-smelling hospital room. I could hear Serena Jiang's indignant voice coming from outside the room. Through the nurse's explanation, I finally understood what had happened. It turned out that to get Lucas Lynn out of jail, Chloe Lynn gave Henry Hua a packet of drugs. According to Chloe Lynn, the drug's effect was supposed to make me temporarily lose my voice. If I agreed to release Lucas Lynn, she would give me the antidote and call it quits. However, none of them expected that I had already been diagnosed with stomach cancer and was cautious about what I ate. After taking the potent drug, I immediately passed out from the pain. Fortunately, Serena Jiang, who had noticed something was wrong from the audience, rushed me to the hospital in time. I didn't know. I really didn't know she was so seriously ill. Henry Hua's agitated voice suddenly came from outside the door. His eyes were red, and his usual composure was gone, replaced with a pleading grip on Serena Jiang's hand. "Let me in to see her, just for a moment, just one glance." Before I could react, he pushed the door open from the outside. The moment he looked up, he was met with my calm and steady gaze. Instantly, the room fell silent. "Serena, please step out." After a long silence, I finally spoke. Once Serena Jiang closed the door, leaving just Henry Hua and me in the room, he cautiously moved closer with red-rimmed eyes. But when he was one step away, I raised my hand to stop him from coming any closer. "Mr. Hua, regarding this incident where you failed to poison me, I have two solutions. First, you and Lucas Lin can both go to prison. Second, my lawyer has already drafted a compensation agreement. You just need to sign it." I picked up the agreement that Serena Jiang had prepared while I was unconscious and handed it to him. He almost immediately flipped to the last page and signed his name without even looking at it. When he looked up at me, there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Sophie, sure, I was wrong. I really didn't know you were so seriously ill, nor did I know Chloe Lin was that kind of person. I was blind to my own feelings before, mistaking you for Chloe Lin's substitute. All along." He suddenly knelt on one knee and held up a finely crafted jade bracelet in front of me. "Sophie, sure, can we start over?" For a moment, I was dazed as I looked at the bracelet. I knew it was a family heirloom passed down through generations, meant for the eldest daughter-in-law. Giving me this bracelet meant he was truly sincere. If this scene had happened in my previous life, I would have accepted it with joy. But in this life, I no longer needed it. "Mr. Hua," I called softly, a mocking smile tugging at my lips. "What makes you think that signing that agreement means I have forgiven you?" Henry Hua's gaze wavered, and he looked up at me in disbelief. At that moment, I grabbed the glass of water from the table and splashed it in his face. "Don't worry, there's more to come." My reputation soared once again following the incident with Henry Hua's poisoning. Many classmates at school were indignant on my behalf. "We're not some evil NPCs from a novel. It's obvious that Chloe Lin, that hypocrite, was behind this. I just don't get it. She has taken Sophie's place for so many years without any guilt, and now she's stirring up trouble. Ha ha ha, maybe she's jealous that Sophie sure is better than her. After all, Miss Perfect has been pampered all these years, yet she can't match Sophie sure in looks or academics. It must drive her crazy. Stop talking nonsense. If you ask me, when it comes to sending guys to do her dirty work, she beats even Sophie sure." Rumors spread throughout the school, and Chloe Lin's reputation plummeted. Seeing her two most loyal knights abandon her, she finally began to panic. She used to think that as long as she wasn't directly involved, no matter how big the issue, it wouldn't fall back on her. However, her reputation had recently taken such a hit that several art schools, which had previously agreed to admit her, started to face external scrutiny. Many people commented under the official school blog saying, "One must learn virtue before learning art," and others questioned whether she truly earned her place through her own abilities. In this situation, the year-end performance, which would be live-streamed online, became her last lifeline. If she performed well, she could still secure her admission, perhaps only leaving behind some negative rumors. But if she failed at this critical moment, she might completely sink under the weight of public opinion. For this reason, she began training earnestly for the first time. On the day the performance schedule was released, everyone was surprised to find that the name for the outstanding student's speech had been changed to Serena Jiang. And my name was placed right next to Chloe Lin's. How could she possibly know how to play any instruments? She's a country bumpkin. In the violin practice room, Chloe Lin laughed so hard she almost choked. When the list was suddenly changed, she was initially confused, but that was quickly followed by unrestrained laughter. She must have had a falling out with the Jiang family's eldest daughter. I knew there had to be a reason why the eldest daughter gave up the spot for an excellent student to her. It was all a setup to catch her off guard. Chloe Lin's friends joined in the laughter. Most of them came from less privileged backgrounds, but instead of working hard for scholarships, they relied on Chloe Lin's generous allowance. Recently, Chloe Lin's reputation had been declining, which made them anxious. At this moment, they all wanted to use this opportunity to turn things around and laugh at my expense. Soon, the day of the year-end performance arrived. The hall was filled with distinguished guests, with various industry leaders making appearances. As the host's voice echoed, the year-end performance officially began. Thanks to the Lin family's influence, Chloe Lin's and my performance were scheduled towards the end as one of the highlights. Before going on stage, Chloe Lin stood in front of me, looking down at my unique attire and the simple snakeskin bag in my hand with disdain in her eyes. "Sophie Lin, do you know that this dress I'm wearing was specially flown in from France by my mom? Just the diamonds on it alone cost 5 figures. She lowered her head, her eyes filled with mockery as she looked at me. "No matter what tricks you use, what can you do? This diamond is the unbridgeable gap between us." After speaking, she entered the stage proudly like a swan. The bright lights shone down, and the intense sound of the violin filled the room. Perhaps to show off her skills, she chose a piece that demanded high-speed fingerwork, Flight of the Bumblebee. I watched her confidently and flamboyantly play the violin on stage. To be fair, after such a long period of practice, her performance of the piece was indeed impressive. Even a few music professors I recognized in the audience couldn't help but close their eyes and enjoy it. However, I didn't choose to share the same stage with her to let her steal the spotlight. Squatting down, I slowly took out a swana from the snakeskin bag that Chloe Lin despised so much. On the stage, the girl was pure as a painting, and with her slender fingertips, spirited notes leaped from the strings of her instrument. The audience below was entranced, and even the representatives from several controversial music academies relaxed their expressions in relief. However, amidst the peaceful scene, a clearer and more resonant sound suddenly emerged from a previously unlit corner. Initially, the sound merely accompanied the violin's melody, but gradually, it grew clearer and more captivating, subtly overshadowing the violin. The masters who had been immersed in the music all opened their eyes simultaneously. In their experience, the violin is an instrument with a strong penetrating power, and most other instruments can only complement it. Rarely does an instrument directly overshadow it. It was under such public scrutiny that I slowly moved from the edge of the stage into the light. The outfit that Chloe Lin scorned as mismatched was, in fact, the most traditional attire of the Miao people. Indeed, in the Lin family, where neither father nor mother showed affection, it was a fool's dream to gather a more splendid dress than Chloe Lin's. But must a performance outfit always be as luxurious and beautiful as possible? Sometimes, traditional elements might outshine the trendier ones we pursue. I could see Chloe Lin before me, with beads of sweat already forming on her neck. No one understood the situation better than she did. Yet, she gritted her teeth, determined to make one last effort. But the moment she drew her bow, my swana's pitch suddenly shifted. In an instant, it was as if the clouds parted and the fog lifted, the deadwood came to life, and everything in the world became clear, leaving only the sounds of birds chirping in the mountains and forests. And after a few bird calls, the entire melody became grand, like an overwhelming wave or a galloping herd of horses. A complete rendition of 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix echoed through the hall. The applause from the audience was thunderous, but everyone knew the most enthusiastic applause was for me. In front of everyone's eyes, I defeated Chloe Lin with the very thing she looked down upon the most. The video of Chloe Lin and me performing on stage was uploaded to a video sharing site. Within less than a day, the video views soared. But that wasn't the most surprising thing about the performance. Serena Jiang, who replaced me as the outstanding student representative, did not, as Chloe Lin had anticipated, hold a grudge against me. Instead, at the end of her speech, she announced a significant piece of news. Using the compensation money given to me by Henry Hua, Serena Jiang and I plan to break away from our families and start our own business. Initially, our actions were not well received. People thought we were just rich kids acting on a whim and would eventually turn to our families for help. However, several years later, the business group we founded flourished and became a new noble in the business world. With the advantage of my rebirth, I avoided many business mistakes and invested the money I earned into several future-renowned medical companies. Many companies revived under my investment, developing new drugs ahead of schedule and saving countless lives. With my newfound wealth, I also submitted evidence to the court of the various bullying tactics Lucas Lin used against me and the Lin family. This time, I didn't need him to repent over my dead body. I could send him to prison myself. It felt like breaking free from the constraints of the plot. My path became increasingly smooth. I invested in many products in the same industry as Henry Hua. Initially, he didn't take me seriously, making obvious concessions as if toying with a child. But as time went on, he realized I was serious about business. I attracted a large number of capable workers with high salaries. At the same time, I avoided the 996 work culture, provided ample rest time, and refrained from emotional abuse of power. In just a few years, the male lead I once looked up to didn't even have the chance to have a meal with me. The most surprising thing to me was Chloe Lin. After losing face at the performance, she shut herself in as if she'd lost her mind, and there were occasional sounds of things being smashed at home. No matter how intense the feelings, they would fade under such torment. In the end, her parents had her committed to a mental hospital. The day I went to see her happened to be one of her rare moments of clarity. Through the bars, she roared at me. "If it weren't for you, my life would be perfect." I pulled away her hand that was reaching through the bars and calmly told her, "You're wrong. The one who ruined your perfect life has always been you." Whether before or after my rebirth, my fundamental goal was always to live my own life well. As a fake heiress, Chloe Lin was born into privilege and was always the center of attention in the Lin family. Even after her true identity was exposed, the Lin family had no intention of driving her out. In such a situation, if she had focused on improving herself instead of harming me, even if the Lin family eventually turned against her, she could still carve out a place for herself. Unfortunately, she never saw the limitless potential within her. As I walked out of the mental hospital, the sun was shining brightly outside. On the chat app, Serena Jiang was enthusiastically cheering for me, saying that one of our invested physics laboratories had made new progress and urging me to come quickly. I smiled, turned off my phone, and pressed the accelerator. The fiery red sports car became a twinkling red dot on the horizon. My brand new life was setting sail.